Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. Our host today is Sabine Vatel.
The swindlers came to town and told the emperor that they could weave a robe of magnificent beauty. The catch was that the thread was magical, and only the smart people could see it. None of the ruler's advisors wanted to admit that they saw nothing. They didn't want to be thought of as stupid, so they pretended to admire their king's outfit while he paraded in the streets in his underwear. Until, of course, a child in the crowd shouted, "The emperor has no clothes on." This fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen is a sort of a metaphor for the need of a big reality check among young adults. The story reminds me of one young adult in particular, whose story I read in the Business Week. She said, "I dreamed big, but then reality seeped in." This young woman and other young adults like her are realizing that they are out in the world economically naked and unprepared. The minimum requirement of a college degree no longer guarantees the financial security. In fact, the generation that came with the age of the internet is distinguished as being, I quote, the most indebted generation in modern history. My name is Sabine Vatel, and I thank you for tuning in to Hope on Fire, Financial Fitness, What's Your Motivation? And to help us with talking about this thing of finances, we have my wonderful co-host, Chris Lang.
Hi, Sabine.
Chris.
It's good to be here today.
It's good to have you. And I know you bring a lot of experience with financial background, so this is great. I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you as well. And we have our financial guru, our finance person, money, career, and stewardship, Randy Magray. And I'm so excited that you're here, Randy.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. This is great. We had a previous show, Financial Fitness Part 1, that our listeners can catch by tuning into hopeonfire.org.
That's right.
And it was a great show on finance, a very practical, down-to-earth, and we want to continue on that conversation. And I don't know if most people are like me, but when I hear finances, money, dollars, my eyes just glaze, and I become a little intimidated by that topic. And until I realize that really it's part of our wholeness to talk about finances, and not like one separate thing, for example, from our spiritual walk. And I had tendency before of separating the two somehow. Mm-hmm. And finances are very much intricate. In the Bible, it's mentioned many times. And you said that last time, Randy, that money comes up a lot of times in the Bible.
Yeah, it was over 2,000 times, actually.
Yeah, so it must be pretty important.
Yeah, I think that, so much is tied to our finances. So much of finances is tied to just everyday life. You can't get around it.
Yeah, especially if you don't have any money.
That's true.
Because it's real important.
Well, and something that came out when we were planning for this program and discussing what we were going to go over in this topic for our listeners, that really resonated with me is this idea of the social responsibility. We think so much as Christians about moral accountability for the kind of a lifestyle we live. And as you said, Sabine, it's so natural for young adults and just about any age group, quite frankly, to sort of cubbyhole finances off to the side. Mm-hmm. And yet, Randy, you made a great comment about the fact that people notice when you've got your finances together and you're disciplined in the way that you spend your money and save your money, that it becomes a witness. And I hope by the end of the program today, Sabine, our listeners are going to see the practical side of the impact that God can use and the way that you manage your money.
That's right. Not only does it bring peace of mind, but you're right, this idea that we are actually witnesses to people is tremendous. When we talk about money in a Christian context, oftentimes the mistake we made is associated, like to be a Christian somehow is associated with being poor. That's one school of thought. And I think a lot of people think about the rich young ruler in Luke 18, when Jesus says, sell all you have and distribute it to the poor. But it's not so. That's not what Jesus was talking about when he said that.
That's right. I mean, so often we do look at that, and I think a lot of Christians almost feel guilty if they become wealthy. And
exactly.
Jesus was not against the rich man's money.
Right.
It's almost like, see, God is against, and as if being poor equals humility. Was that what you
said? Or holiness, right. The poor you are, the more holy you are.
Having poverty. Now, I've been to the third world countries where there's a lot of poverty, and it is true that when you don't have a lot to lose, sometimes life is a little bit simpler. And I think that's why we're finding actually people committing suicide over being deep in credit card debt in this country today and other westernized countries, because it actually shackles us when we allow ourselves to be committed to the urgency of having something right now.
Right. Or being defined by our bank account.
Yeah, you know, Jesus wasn't, getting back to the rich young ruler, Jesus was challenging that man from the standpoint that, you know, Jesus sees all of our issues and all of our weaknesses and all of our biases and tendencies. And for that man, all of his tremendous wealth was what he was keeping somehow prioritized above his walk, because he kept the commandments.
Indeed.
The dude was a church member.
Right.
I've done them all, he said.
That's right.
That's right.
It kept them all. There's one thing you're lacking. And Jesus loved that man. Right. Jesus was not trying to hose down his parade.
No. So, in fact, he said, you know, your wealth will be used for the good. And it goes again to what you were saying in terms of social responsibility, using the gift that you have to serve other people.
Yeah, I mean, it is a witness, but at the same time, a lot of it, you know, even look at the rich young ruler. I mean, I wasn't really taught about money growing up. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, and it wasn't, you know, finances is a lot of times a very, you know, taboo, very hush-hush.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want anyone to know what we make or what we, you know, obviously things like cars and things, you know, people have an idea, but we don't want anyone to know what we make, what we spend, and where we spend it. And when you close down those communication lines, it's hard then to expect people and our kids and things to come behind us and have any better idea than we did growing up.
Yeah, you bring an important point, and I think we're going to bring out again the importance of being educated about money. Now, on the flip side of that philosophy of money, you've seen those preachers with expensive suits saying, telling their congregants that we were meant to be the head and not the tail, and you're gonna open up that business. You're gonna have the money that you need, and to be a Christian is again to be successful, and we ask God for that money, and He will provide that money and make us rich. And it's the barometers of our spirituality. That's the flip side of it.
Yeah, there's been a huge growth in Christianity in the Western countries. A term that we hear a lot used is the prosperity gospel.
Absolutely.
If you do X, Y, and Z, you'll become richer than you could ever dream. And it's almost like this self-help concept that has the label Christian on it.
Right.
And you know, a book that actually started this phenomenon several years ago that I read was called The Prayer of Jabez. And when you read that text in 2 Chronicles, and you're praying over that text, you don't see a lot of the sermons that people are preaching off that text. Enlarge my borders is one of the phrases that are that come from that prayer of that man. And you know, you made a comment, Randy, that enlarging your borders doesn't necessarily mean make me a real estate tycoon.
No,
but Donald Trump, you're not.
You know.
But they promise you can be Donald Trump if you do pray that prayer.
You know, the end of that text says the Lord heard his prayer and gave him everything he asked for.
Yeah.
And so God is not cosmic Santa Claus. No. And I am concerned the prosperity gospel twists maybe the context of that prayer.
Yeah, it's such a consumer's approach to religion, and I don't think that was God's plan for us.
I think it leaves out the personal part of your finances with God as well. I mean, there's a part where you sit down with God and he lays things out like tithes and offerings and such.
That's right.
And it really takes him out of the equation where it's more I'm just asking for what can I receive rather than, you know, use what I have and take my talents and use my money and use everything that you need from me. But if you're just asking and you're praying for that, you're missing out on that more close.
I mean,
let's
be honest though. I mean, God chooses human beings to further His work in the world.
Sure, He doesn't have to, but He does.
He does. He could write the gospel across the sky and use angels to come and preach every Sabbath in the pulpit.
Right.
But guess what? God chooses you and me, and last I checked, we need cash to pay our bills, and churches need money to move forward in spreading the gospel.
That's the pragmatic side, yes.
So there's a practical aspect that so many, I think, miss in the power and the necessary. That's why I think the Bible does talk so much about accountability with resources. And we were going to talk and bring up the Abrahams of the Bible and the Solomons of the Bible.
Those are our rich people.
These are wealthy God-fearing people.
Yeah, and we talk about organizations, people, and how does that apply to us personally? We said a sense of mission, but what about family investment, leaving a legacy for our families? That's pretty important, and you kind of touched on that. And also the value of money, teaching people that money doesn't grow on trees. That's kind of a cliche. but the actual value of what money means. Is there a sense of entitlement from even the generation coming after me? I mean,
That's
there's a
right.
big gap
That's
between
right. Yeah,
those who are
mindset.
younger. The mindset is a little bit different, even from mine.
There's clearly an expectation, I think, in the younger generations, in Gen X or Gen Y, whatever generation
I think
coming
it's Y
up
now.
is.
I think we're in Y. Y or
But
Z.
It's such an instantaneous gratification attitude that because of technology, you can get almost anything you want right now. But you know what? I was blessed to have parents when I grew up who I mean, they espoused this concept that you actually save for what you need and you don't spend what you don't have.
That's novel.
And you know what? I didn't like hearing some of that preaching at home when I was younger. But you know what? One of the terms my dad used, he called it delayed gratification. I hated hearing it. When I was driving, hey, when you're driving an old beat-up car in college,
don't talk to me about delay.
It's your grandmother's car that you're driving as a hand-me-down machine to get to class. I'm begging Dad, come on, I can't get dates in this. But he says, hang on, man, you're going to earn money someday.
You were scarred,
At least
Chris.
you got wheels. And guess what? The girls will love you for who you are, not for what you're driving. So, I hated hearing all that. But you know what? I'm so glad that there was a mentality that was instructed. So it is true. Family legacy is more than just saving money for college for your babies, which I know you're passionate about now.
Sure.
You've got a little girl.
Yeah.
And so, but beyond all of that, it's the mentality that the parents can pass on to the next generation.
And that, go ahead, Randy, please.
But our parents, just to follow up with what Chris was saying, while mine wasn't a vocal, it was very much a lead by example. I mean, it wasn't, we didn't have maybe everything that we always wanted, but everything we needed was always there, and it wasn't like you were, mortgaging the future for the present. And so that was still instilled in me, even though it wasn't a vocal. But, with your family, obviously being vocal really laid an impression on you, which I think we need to, be cognizant about.
Yeah, I wish we had been maybe a bit more intentional. And is it just me, or are phones getting smaller? And the reason why I bring this is getting the next gadget, never being happy.
I was wondering where that is on our outline.
Yeah, the phones are getting. The last one I saw was like, I mean, really, it could fit in my wallet.
That's true.
And again, we're
always upgrading.
We're
to something
upgrading,
new.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're never satisfied with we want the latest thing. And I think there's something in our culture that sort of pushes us to keep up with the Jones or the Smith or whoever.
Every time I think of that, we talked earlier about Solomon and wise people and asking, seeking God's wisdom first before the other things that came with that, and asking, you shall, seek, you shall find, asking, it will be given to you. Yeah. And if you're seeking that part first, the rest of it, I mean, obviously came along for Solomon.
Yes.
You can look at Job, and I mean, even though he had it and he took it away, I mean, you know what I mean? God's always there to.
That's a good point, Randy. The motivation behind getting means a wealth. I mean, becoming rich. The motivation behind all that is the key. And
we'll hear more about that in the second half of our program. And those listening to us who feel that somebody who's in financial difficulty need to hear this, go get them, and we'll get into practical aspect of financing. Welcome back, listeners, to Hope on Fire. I'm your host for today, Sabine Vatel, and we have, of course, my co-host Chris Lang and Randy Magray, a contributing editor for Money, Career, and Stewardship, and we're talking about financial fitness. This is actually part 2 of a series, and this one is called What's Your Motivation? And we want to get into this idea of what is our motivation in finances and get into some practical advice for those who are listening to us. I was reading through a book called Living Your Life for Half the Price. It caught my attention. Is that possible? Anyway, the author, she's found in our website, www.hopeonfire.org. She says that fear is a driving force for people in terms of their money. And I know you've seen that a lot in your practice, Randy, because you work as a financial advisor. And you've, I'm sure, met people who come to you with fear and trembling.
Yeah, I was a financial advisor for 4 years. Obviously, on a day-to-day basis, you see a lot of clients. I had an individual come to me who was young, fresh out of college, about 22 years old, making a 6-figure income. And he was interested in setting up his retirement plan. And as we went through the background questions, what kind of debt do you carry? What are your expenses? Things of that nature, annual income. And we looked at it and said, wow, you need to be maxing out everything that you can, which was more than $20,000 that he was contributing to his retirement, planning for the future.
Right.
It came back in about 3 months, and came to see me, and he kind of was shifting in his seat, a little uncomfortable, kind of not wanting to look me in the eyes. And, obviously there was a problem. He said, well, what's the problem? He said, I've got, all kinds of credit card debt, over $40,000.
And he had told you that before. He
had omitted that to me before.
He was scot-free, right?
He said everything was scot-free. Had he divulged the information from the get-go, we obviously wouldn't have created the same plan for him.
Right.
So he basically said, I can't do this. The plan we set up is not possible because I've got too much debt.
I've got too much debt.
And now I'm coming to tell you I'm in trouble.
And the credit card debt, it was 18, 20, 23% interest on some of these credit cards. And he said, I can't keep up with the payments. Plus, and to make the kind of income that he had, you're doing even a positive thing by starting to think. I mean, someone 22 years old thinking about retirement is nearly unheard of.
We've got to give him credit for that, I guess. Yeah.
But, being honest with yourself and really giving an honest evaluation of your finances is a must.
And Chris sort of alluded to that earlier, that this thing, or maybe you did, hiding, and we don't want to put the card on the table, and there's an embarrassment with being in debt,
Yeah, he actually was hiding from you every time you walked by him at the hospital.
Oh, yeah, I'd walk past him.
Kind of slinking behind the wall.
Back this way, back
But
that
you know
way.
what? That's an interesting illustration for a huge industry of young adults who get sucked into this idea thinking that as long as I'm earning more money, I can keep spending more money. And you know what? That's a rosy, optimistic expectation that's pretty typical for young adults, to just keep thinking that things will just be getting better from here. But we don't think about emergencies oftentimes. Credit has become so ingrained in our culture that once you decide that you're never gonna be out of debt, then you can afford anything.
That's right. I mean, it's deceiving because they get a bunch of credit cards at college even before they graduate, right? They have
I got my first credit card when I was 18. I wasn't even in college.
Imagine an 18-year-old with a credit card.
Yeah.
I mean, not all 18-year-olds, but most, it seems.
Sure. Well, and credit card companies, that's the way they market it to people of all ages, but especially the young adults, is that, that anything that you need now, this is your life. You deserve it. You're a good person. And look at all this grand stuff that you can do with frequent flyer miles, but they don't tell you how you're going to pay for this on the backside.
See, they offer the salvation of many things to be cool, as you said, the smaller cell phone with all your friends. But the reality is they're not selling salvation; they're selling bondage. And we're going to talk about the idea that when you save money, it becomes as addictive as spending. There was an article in Wall Street Journal about the chemical reaction that actually happens when some people go and buy things at the store, and they actually have this chemical release called dopamine, this pleasure chemical that happens when that makes us feel good, kind of like
chocolate,
drinking caffeine or something like that. But it's a real phenomenon that actually happens when people get addicted to shopping for things, or and then they have that big crash on the other side, that buyer's remorse we call it.
Right, they get hooked on the dopamine.
But you know what? There's an opposite reaction that happens when you start to see your bank account rising because you're intentionally putting away things by cutting out some of your expenses in your life, and we'll talk about some of that structure in a minute. But I want to just share with our listeners that, you know what, saving can become addictive too, in a good way.
Speaking of experience, Chris.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you decide that you're not going to give up, you're not going to sacrifice for the immediate urgent need to have something right now, for the long-term stress that comes with that.
Right.
I mean, God never intended for us to feel so much stress over having to get buried just because we can't put off something till later. Right. And that's why we want to talk about setting up budgets for things that might be expensive, like a new car, or moving into a different residence, or other big ticket items. You've got to plan ahead for those, as opposed to just throwing. Credit is so easy. And as you said,
it's a quick fix for so many things.
It should never be the first option we reach for.
Well, let's talk about the options. Go ahead, Randy.
Well, those are the attitudes. I mean, as we were doing research for this, you look at some of the message boards about articles that deal with, being deeper in debt and in denial, and you look at some of the comments that readers leave, like, well, you've obviously never been poor because you don't know what it's like not to have money, and, you need a car to get to work, and I had to buy this new car, and, it's almost like, I can't help it. This is just the way things are, so, I had to be in debt. I didn't have a choice.
And say, in this lady that I mentioned, this author, the book rather that I mentioned, says that the antidote to fear actually is saving and paying yourself.
Exactly.
Actually, she recommends. What do you think about that? Paying yourself in order to begin to save money and have enough. Is it along the line what you told this young man in terms of what he had to do to get out of trouble?
Oh, I agree. I agree with what Chris was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It is a freedom principle. Once you see that what your hard work, instead of just trying to catch up all the time, and it's constantly reaching to try to pull yourself out. Well, I'm only 4,000 in debt. Now I'm only
It becomes
3,800. And it took a whole year to go that little distance. Here you're saying, what if I'm adding? Wow, I'm at 3,000 here. I'm adding to 4,000. Wow, this is great. And I think that's the Holy Spirit saying to you, you're doing a great job, and you're on the right track, and you know what I mean?
There's a spiritual application here.
Sure.
When you lower your stress from that part of your life, you give yourself a better chance to breathe a little bit and reach out and help others that might need help. If there's one phrase that our listeners will remember from today that's really stuck with me, it's saving is like spending money at the Freedom Store.
Yep.
Hello.
Freedom Store. I mean, that is reality.
Right.
And when you get a taste of that, you're not going to go back to spending on plastic just to have the next thing, whatever that might be. Hey, I want to blow out my kitchen and build a new one. Believe me, I want to.
I think you're on record here, so I don't think you can do that.
But I'm not.
Yeah. So people are listening to us and like, okay. What's the first step? So what do they have to do?
The first step is to create a defensive spending strategy.
Okay.
You need to have organization, needing a plan. Because if you don't plan, then you're just planning to fail. Because if you don't know what you're spending every month, you don't have anything in place, there's no way to gauge where you're at or where you need to go.
Okay.
This is one area actually where technology has really helped us a lot to simplify the part of tracking what you're spending. I use Microsoft Money. Some people use Quicken, but it automates your bill paying so that you can actually run a report in an instant and see where all your money's going.
Okay, so for those who that means on a computer, what if you don't, well, that's really rare, but what if you're not computer savvy, or let's say,
well, even if you're not,
you can access to Quicken or something.
Sure, even if you're not computer savvy, anyone has a piece of legal paper, and you can write down, these are my monthly expenses. Is there any place that I can trim? Even if you write them down, some people might be surprised as to how much money is going out the door for things that they didn't even realize they were spending.
I've read the latte factor or something like that. Have you guys
That's
heard?
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That basically money you spend on, like, I don't know,
eating out, these expensive drinks, whether it's smoothies or, you can buy the ingredients and make stuff at home.
Right.
But, we are so used to the convenience of having stuff right now.
And we lose money just like that.
Even putting change out of your pocket for 6 months. I mean, try it once. I did after reading an article, and you'd be surprised the size jar you have and how much is in there.
Pull it out of the seat of your car.
That's
and
it.
There you go.
That's it.
I keep hearing that to be a millionaire is not that hard, and it's actually very attainable.
Well, it absolutely is. 70% of the millionaires in this country, in the United States, their neighbors earn more than they do. Think about that.
Wow.
You would never know. In fact, there's a 47-year-old person that I just read about who says, you know what, I could retire tomorrow. But he said, you know what the best part about it is no one would know that I've accumulated so much wealth because I don't drive the latest car. I don't have the biggest house on the block.
Right.
There's a mentality that we just simply put off things that we absolutely don't need. There's a difference between a necessity and a greed, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like what somebody said, trying to please somebody. We don't keep up with people who don't care about us.
Yeah, we spend money on things we don't need with money we don't have.
Hear this, listeners.
To impress people that we don't know or don't like.
Right.
That's what our consumeristic society has done.
It's a reality.
And you mentioned something about maxing out. And just to define what you mean by maxing out, because we talked a little about saving and retirement.
Sure.
And a million, I remember you guys saying $1 million is really not that much.
If you start, I mean, obviously time is your greatest ally when you're talking about compounding interest, things like that. And, the idea of saving for retirement is, especially for our generation, very boring. Nobody wants to talk about it. They would rather talk about a new iPod than saving for retirement.
Right.
But, time is on your side. And the best thing to do is to ask for help. People don't feel like they're not comfortable asking for help. They don't, I should be able to do this on my own. Even pros ask advice from the pros. I mean,
so good to know.
Even
a good point.
Exactly. And so, what the first thing to get started, even if you don't have a plan, the best thing to do is go find someone either at your place of employment if you have a plan. If not, you need to ask around. Friends, everybody knows somebody, and you can.
We know you, right?
Yeah.
Right, you know me.
Randy,
Right.
Randy,
You sure you're Randy?
our contributing editor for finance and career. So
Right. So
call Randy.
Find professional help. Make sure.
And do you have to pay for that? You don't always have to pay for financial help, do you?
A lot of times there are plans that you do. There are some that you don't, and that's things you just need to sit down and discuss with that person. You need to as you're looking forward to retirement. I mean, the first thing is to take advantage of whatever your employer offers, if they do. If not, then it's time to search for another plan. There's lots of resources. Even Clark Howard. I love listening to Clark Howard on the radio or clarkhoward.com. Lots of things that
a lot of practical advice.
Yeah.
Just practical advice to help you make
Crown Financial Ministries, and we have their website listed on our website.
Good.
And they have some great resources as well too that they can help our listeners with.
And if you've already gotten too far where you feel like you're in a place that you can't get out of, a good website is www.nfcc.org, and that's a credit counseling services that can help you if you feel like you've already gone past that limit.
And we'll definitely list that as well on our website. And thank you so much, Chris and Randy. You guys were great and as helpful as usual. And thank you so much for joining us today. We have two choices, life or death. And the path that leads to destruction is pretty alluring. So we invite you to surrender your life and your financial situation to Him today. Allow God to bless you beyond what you can think or imagine.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Once again, that's Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.